What's up, everybody? I'm Scott Melker, and this is the Wolf of All Streets podcast, where twice a week I talk to your favorite personality from the worlds of Bitcoin, finance, art, music, politics, and sports. This show is powered by Blockworks Group, a media company with over 20 podcasts in their network. Check them out at blockworksgroup.io. Now, if you like the podcast and you follow me on Twitter, you absolutely need to check out my website and join my newsletter, where I share all my trades, charts, analysis, market thoughts, and lessons on improving your trading and investing. You can check all of that out at my brand spanking new website, thewolfofallstreets.io. With that, let's get into what's actually important, and that is today's guest, who is Peter McCormack, the host of What Bitcoin Did podcast, Defiance podcast, and Defiance TV. When he isn't interviewing guests about Bitcoin, he's on foot all around the world, covering some of the most pressing global issues such as tyranny, inequality, censorship, technological barriers, and more. As a result of his hard work as a journalist and filmmaker, he's accrued millions of downloads and built an incredibly fast-growing platform. So, Peter, man, thank you for taking time out of that obviously busy schedule to be here and chat.
Well, yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Not so busy right now, obviously, with the lockdown. Well, different kind of busy. But as we're doing video, can we just explain that I've just got off my Peloton, and that's why I look like shit, and I'm like sweating? Can we tell people that?
We've all been there, and I think that we've seen a different side of every single person as a result of this lockdown. Like nobody's well kept, nobody's well dressed. It's just kind of the nature of the beast at this point, I think. But yeah, so Peter just did 90 minutes on his Peloton. I told him that I can do about 30 minutes before my butt is raw and I lose patience and give up. So he's a beast.
Oh, dude, my butt's raw. Do you know what you were saying earlier about the padded shorts? I've got the padded shorts and the gel seat that goes over the top of the seat. And now I'm thinking of doubling up the gel seat because I've had that thing for a couple of months now, and it's not getting easier.
No, it's pretty brutal. So as I alluded to in the intro, man, you do a lot. How do you manage to produce so much quality content? I mean, how do you get all of that done?
Well, I have a team now, thankfully. So it's all kind of built with having a team. So when I first started, I had one show a week and I was engineering it and doing it all. And, that was fine. And then I kind of went up to 2 shows and engineered it a bit and got a little bit busier. And some guy wrote to me and just said, look, can I do your engineering? And I'm like, yeah, not a problem. And then I started Defiant. He got busier and I was like, do you want to join me full time? And he was like, yeah. And then he takes over a lot of the work. So when I've done a show, I just send him the files. He writes all the scripts. I record the scripts. He masters it and then does all the publishing work. And now we started producing these kind of audio documentaries. I've now got a producer and a researcher who work with me for working on the background content. So really, it's just, look, I work hard. I've always worked hard. I've always known that I've not always been the smartest, but definitely I can outwork people. And so I just work really hard, and I've been lucky to build this business up, and I've got this really amazing team around me who do a lot of the work for me now. So yeah, it's just scaling a business, dude. Yeah,
it's awesome. So tell me more about how you got here. I mean, obviously everyone in this community knows who you are and what you do now, but what were the beginnings of your story? I know that you've had a pretty colorful background.
Yeah, like I've told this before, it's just a weird chain of events. I first discovered Bitcoin in 2013, buying drugs on the Silk Road. Just amazing. It's somebody who liked his drugs. That was such an amazing thing to be able to do because it just made everything easier. And the review system they had in place just cut out all the shit and the crap quality. I don't do drugs now, but that was cool. And obviously had to use Bitcoin, right? So I first discovered Bitcoin then, but then I stopped taking drugs and and then had no need for Bitcoin. Didn't really think of it anything beyond. I honestly never looked into it. I didn't know what it was. I just used it. And then a few years later, in end of 2016, when my mum got sick, I wanted to buy her some cannabis oil, so just bought some more Bitcoin. And I got divorced, and my company had collapsed at the time, so I was just had nothing to do. So I thought. I'd gone on Coinbase and bought the Bitcoin, but seen this Ethereum thing as well. And I was like, okay, what's this? And I just started reading about it and, spoke to my dad, put some money into it, started trading, made and lost a load of money very quickly. But knowing I was never going to be a trader because I was just crap at it. my friend, this guy Rich Roll, has this podcast. He's like this vegan athlete, and I'd gone to one of his retreats in Italy just when I was having my spiritual / midlife breakdowns / post-divorce recovery. I was just being mental. I was just like, fuck, I'm going to meditate and go to yoga retreats. Anyway, I met this dude, and he said, like, if you're ever in LA, come and see me. And I did. And it was during the Bitcoin time. And I was like, I think I'm going to do a podcast about Bitcoin. He was like, do it, dude. Like, here's the equipment. Here's how you do it. So I just ordered it all on Amazon and then text Luke Martin. I was like, because he was in LA, I was like, Luke, I'm going to start a podcast. Do you want to be on it? And he said, yeah. So I got a Uber up to his, recorded the first show, and here we are approaching episode 250.
250, my God. That's funny because I think I texted you. You were one of the first persons. I was like, so what's up with this podcast thing? Should I do it? You were like, absolutely, man. Let me know how I can help. Yeah. So it's kind of funny to hear that you had a similar experience there. So what was it about? Yeah, I love it, man. I love it. So what was it that really turned you on to Bitcoin when you sort of went down the rabbit hole? Because obviously, like, I mean, you're a person who you care about other people, you care about global issues, all the things that I sort of listed before. Did that bring you to Bitcoin, or did Bitcoin sort of bring you to that?
No, and not even the ability to buy something for my mum made me think about it as some amazing technology. I'm not trained in economics. I didn't even think about that as a big issue. All that happened was, at the time, as like, I was able to buy this digital money. It seemed to be something interesting and different from PayPal. And I was like, if this is a new wave of like not really understand what decentralization is, but like just knowing that there was this new form of decentralized money, I was like, oh, well, if you get in early, you can make a bunch of money. And I was just like, I just thought I could make a bunch of money. That's all it was.
Same.
And just traded and hit a bull run. Like I say, made and lost a load of money. But during that time, just because what happened was, when you were trading the assets, you had to learn about them. It's like, if you're going to invest in a company, dude, you got to look at their P&L. You got to look at the innovation. You got to look at what their competitors are doing. So you end up doing that for like crypto assets. And I did that. And so then I ended up learning more about them, and then, learning more about Bitcoin, and realized, oh, actually, this is really, really cool and interesting. And kind of gone that kind of full transition now, where I don't trade anymore. I don't really look at charts. I don't really look at the price. The only time I ever know the price is when people tweet about it. Right. And because I mean, it's different for you. You're a trader, dude. But like, I've tried to separate myself from the price to focus more on the tech. And yeah, I mean, and here I am now, like, doing this show all about it. And, I'm a huge supporter of Bitcoin. And I think it can change the world. And look, I'm not like the most hardcore Bitcoiners. I don't think I've either they're wrong and they believe Bitcoin can fix things it can't, or I'm wrong and I'm not there yet where they are. But like, I feel like as time goes on, I become more and more of a Bitcoiner.
It's interesting because, it's kind of like the meme, I guess, in this industry is Bitcoin fixes this. And as you just sort of alluded to, they apply it to literally everything. And it obviously doesn't fix everything. I think I agree with you more there. But I mean, you've been all around the world. Mm-hmm. What does it fix? I mean, I know you were in Venezuela. I know it fixes a lot of problems in a place like Venezuela. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really fix much stuff in the US and the UK, right? It fixed my ability to get it fixed my problem with scoring crack cocaine down in a Tesco's car park from some fucking loser. It fixed that, but it doesn't really, like, not important issues. And I know that might trigger some people, and they'll argue about it. Like, of course it does. I wouldn't have it if it didn't fix some issues. But basically, the most important use case I've seen was in Venezuela. Now, it can't fix Venezuela.
No, of course.
you need to get rid of the men with the guns, and that is Maduro, and that needs to happen, right? And I know someone will make the argument, well, if we have hyper Bitcoinization over a long enough time period, then there is no money left, and blah blah blah. Like, I get that, right?
Yeah,
but we're a long way off that.
Right.
It's not going to fix Venezuela this year or the next 5 years, and it's not going to help most people, because most people are living on like $1 a day or even less. It might be something like ridiculous, like $6 a month. So they can't even use Bitcoin because transaction fees are too high, and they just don't care. Like, even if the transaction fees were so low, I just don't think people would care. I think they care about, how am I going to eat today and how am I going to make the money to do that? And I'll just use whatever money is there. Now, if you're middle class in Venezuela, you give a damn about Bitcoin because you have access to the technology, you're educated, you're earning enough money to care. So when I was out there, I met these miner dudes. They kept all their money in Bitcoin, and all they did is every week they transferred what they needed into the Bolivar, and then spent that money over the week. But they didn't hold their money in the Bolivar because, at least 10% inflation every month. So it solves.
And you didn't have access to your money. Like, I mean, there's limits on how much you can take out of an ATM. I mean, they literally have dysfunctional money. But
yeah, and I met some Argentinians when I was in Uruguay, and they get it as well. They've been through La Corralita, where there was hyperinflation, and then the banks, the government was stopping people actually getting their money from the banks. So they've had their money seized and inflated to nothing. So there are people that get it, and it can solve those problems. And I imagine there's a bunch of people in Lebanon right now who are going to hear about Bitcoin, and they're going to be like, damn, I wish I bought Bitcoin. And there's going to be people in Turkey right now I think they've just hit nearly 13% inflation. They're going to be like, I need Bitcoin right now. And that is a definite problem that Bitcoin can fix in these countries. It's whether we see through this current crisis higher inflation levels in the UK and the US. Whatever people think of MMT, like, it's coped until now in a god-awful way. In a number of ways you can criticize it, but we still haven't had hyperinflation yet. We've had this slow, insidious inflation. What will be interesting to see is if we get kind of higher inflationary numbers in the UK, even 3 or 4% would start to scare people. If we get to 10%, that'll be super interesting. But I think that's almost the main use case for me now, is this kind of hedge against government fuckery. I think seizure resistance is important. I think privacy is important. I think they're all important. But right now, inflation, everybody who's living under any form of inflation is being stolen from right now. And Bitcoin can help prevent that.
Do you think that as a result of COVID and this global economic crisis, that there's been somewhat of an awakening among average people about that problem, where maybe they didn't even realize it at all? I mean, I don't think it's kind of like you alluded to with people in Venezuela. There's certain things that matter to you, and there's certain things that don't. And at a basic level, everybody's just trying to eat, take care of their kids, and do those things. But now it's like there's these huge macro issues that people maybe are becoming aware of. I mean, do you think that your average person gives a shit about inflation, or do you think we're still far off from that?
Way, way off from that. And I tell you why, is I've stopped using my Facebook as a place to put pictures of me and the kids going on holiday. I just don't care anymore. I just got bored of that. But I didn't get rid of it. And all I do now is I use it just to push news or push things on Twitter. So Raoul Pal might put the 10-year bond yield chart up, which is trending towards zero, and he'll explain in the tweet why this is dangerous and what this means. I'll put that up on Facebook with an explanation. Hat tip Raoul Pal. No one gives a shit. I'll explain what inflation is. No one gives a shit. I'll explain what money printing means. Nobody cares, because I think for a couple of reasons. I think it's too much to get your head around it in a social media post. I think most people are just getting on with their lives. And right now they're because most people have this government Stockholm Syndrome, which I had before I discovered Bitcoin, where they're the government is just this thing we vote for and they fix stuff for us, right? They don't. Right. Not many of these people I know are libertarians, or even know libertarianism is an idea. So they just get on with life. And they're put into lockdown, and they expect the government to fix it. And the government puts people on furlough and pays out the money. And they just think, oh, cool, that happens. None of them have gone through the process of questioning what the money printing means and the potential for inflation. And I'm relentlessly explaining it. And some people will argue back. And occasionally I'll get somebody going, I think I've got like 2,000 friends on Facebook, and that's only 2,000 because I get people like add me now because of the show. But
Yeah.
my auntie asked about buying some gold, and another guy posted a link to an article. He said, "Oh, I think Pete McCormack's right," and it was something to do with inflation. People just, I don't think they realize what might be coming. Now, if you go to someone in Lebanon now, if they get their if they get their loan from the IMF and they fix their economy, and you go to people there and say, "Do you want to buy a bit of this alternative currency that can't be inflated? It's called Bitcoin." Explain it to them. I think they're going to get it. And if you go to Argentina, I know they get it. And people in Venezuela who have enough money get it. I think you almost have to go through the pain to get it. And I think it's only when, if we start hitting something like 10% inflation, 15% inflation in Western countries, I think people are going to go, hold on, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
But I just don't think people are questioning it, dude.
Yeah, and I don't think that's likely, honestly.
No.
I mean, I think 3-4%, like you said, it gets scary and it's possible, but I just, I don't see 10-15%. And as much as that's sort of the Bitcoin maximalist wet dream, I just think that that's very far out, if even possible at all, right? So
yeah, I don't know. It depends. I don't know how it pans out. It depends how long this COVID thing goes on. It depends how long they try lockdowns for. But we are heading for an economic crash, like apocalypse. The UK GDP was down, was it like 25% last month, over 1 month? That's the biggest drop in 300 years. And we're not going to have this V-shaped recovery. Lots of jobs are being lost. But I don't think we're going to see the impact for at least 3 months. I think the furlough scheme is going to end, and there's going to be a lot of people out of work scrambling around for jobs, and then it's going to get a little bit more serious. And if the government keeps having to print money to support welfare here, or to support big infrastructure projects to provide jobs, it may have an impact on inflation. I just don't know.
Yeah, it's impossible to predict, and probably like irresponsible to believe that we know what the government is thinking or what kind of plans they have, because they leak so little of it, honestly, to us. It's funny you touched on the V-shaped recovery, and people point to this. Literally, you look at a chart, you see the V-shaped recovery on the stock market. And so I think that a lot of people are fooled or believe that because the stock market's back up, the economy is fixed, which is just so incorrect and terrifying that people, at least in this country, see the stock market and they say, it's fine, we're good. Election's coming, my money's made, my beautiful 401k or whatever. But I agree with you. I mean, I think that we're headed down a really, really dangerous path, and it's going to get far, far worse. But what do you make of the stock market recovery in context of what we're seeing with actual economic data?
Well, it just proves what a big scam this all is. I mean, there's a V-shaped recovery for the stock portfolios of rich people.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's not even say just rich people. I mean, stock holders. But people talk about V-shaped recovery because that's what happened after 9/11. The skies were shut down for 3 days. There was a definite impact on the stock market, an economic crash. People didn't know what this meant. Like 9/11 was one of those moments, one of those probably like 3 or 4 times in your life, exactly where you were when you found out about it.
Yep.
Yeah, I do. You do. I can tell you the exact story. And then we all watched the news for 3 days. No one did any work. The stock market crashed. Nobody knew what it meant. It was, but there was little impact upon the economy because what really happened? Everyone just stopped working for 3 days.
Yeah.
The momentum of business has changed now. Like airlines are not going to get back to the capacity they were at. That could be years. You've got planes just sat there on, and the economics of flying a plane, it's not cheap. So there's a bunch of planes sat there not doing anything, which means you're going to have a lot of pilots losing their jobs. Ryanair have just negotiated a reduction in salaries for pilots in the UK, and they're about to close some of their bases in Germany because they can't renegotiate. There's going to be a lot of pilots, a lot of ground staff, a lot of air staff. They're going to lose their jobs. That's just one industry. Then you've got hotels. Then, what about restaurants? What's going to happen with restaurants or even bars? When I we went to the pub on Saturday, it's not a packed bar because you have to book the table.
Right.
So the only way the economics works for them is they have to raise their prices.
Of course.
That's inflation in a different way.
Right. It's still inflation.
So there's just a lot of stuff that's to come. And I just think the stock market right now is really the US stock market leading things. And my guess is this is Mnuchin and Donald Trump playing one of their cards for 2020 election. If the stock market drops, that's over. The only card this is main card left. So I don't know. It just makes me think more bullshit.
Well, what is your perception? I mean, I know you can't speak for everyone all over the world, but it's funny, as an American, I know how I view our country at this point. I'm really curious as to, from an outsider, someone who's on the outside looking in, what do you make of what's happening here?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I think in terms of your election, you're in a very similar position I was in our election. I couldn't vote. I didn't vote because I had a choice between an actual socialist, a real socialist, not a democratic socialist, an actual socialist who wanted to, for certain industries, I think it was like the railways, he wanted them taking them back into government ownership. So he was an actual socialist, right? And then we had a guy called Boris Johnson, who's a proper right-wing Tory. Now, look, I understand the libertarian arguments against like social safety nets, but whilst you have a government and whilst you have people paying tax, there needs to be a certain redistribution, and the redistribution and the austerity by the Conservative Party was very harsh, and I just couldn't vote for either of them. And I think probably I won't ever vote again. And I think I look at the US and I think at the same time now, you've got Donald Trump, who is a fucking moron, who's objectively speaking a moron.
No, he's actually an idiot. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the people who like him either like him because they're Republican, then therefore they'll like anyone. I think there's that. I think there's the burn it down crowd who like him because they're like, he's just fucking ridiculous. And that's great. And I think there's the crowd who like him because they hate the left so much. But like objectively speaking, he's a lying. He lies. Now, that's not to say he doesn't do other good things, right? I think he does a lot of great stuff. But he is a compulsive liar and everything is about him. Yeah. And I struggle with people who can't see that. But at the same time, I would never want to Joe Biden to be my president. I think the Democrat Party is a joke. So I think it's a very similar position to the UK. What I think is most interesting, I'm a big fan of the US. I've traveled there 70 odd times. Love it. Love the country. Love the people. The politics is the only downside to me of the US, really. Just love the country. And I've spent a lot of time studying the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. I've watched documentaries about Washington, about Jefferson, just really trying to understand what happened during the Civil War, what they tried to do when they built the country. And it blows my mind. It's really, really cool, everything that happened. And it just feels like people talk about the Constitution a lot, but they tend to use it in defense of certain arguments. But it's not like they believe in the whole Constitution anymore.
The cherry pick. It's the same thing. I mean, it's the same thing for religious people with the Bible, right? They choose their one story that they love, but ignore the story that involves throwing stones at someone for interrupting their parents or something. Yeah.
But it's like the Constitution for me, it's not about the individual points. It's almost like it's what they were trying to do in building the nation, what they were trying to prevent, like understanding human nature and understanding how man can be corrupted, and man or woman now, but and it's generally more men anyway. But understanding how man can be corrupted, they wanted to create a way like that could protect the sanctity of the government, and it just feels like that's lost now. You have a government based on surveillance and corruption and money printing and lies. And it's just like, this is so far away from what I believe they tried to build. And that's really sad to me.
It's sad to me as well as an American. I agree 100%. Also, though, interesting, like how much wisdom is there left in great thinkers from hundreds of years ago? No, I believe in the Constitution. Don't get me wrong. It's just sort of a devil's advocate, or another way to view it. People who are religious, are very religious, which is their choice. They look back at the Bible, and like I said, they sort of cherry pick the lines they like, but forget the ones that they don't. They don't really take it into context that they're listening to scientific arguments from people who thought the Earth was flat. You know what I mean? And you go back to 1700s. Well, these guys, yes, they had these great principles, but they also owned slaves, and it wasn't really freedom for everyone. It was sort of freedom for white men. So how much do you believe that they really understood what could possibly be coming? Are there do you think that countries like ours and yours, which is even older, should be rewriting their constitutions for current times, or do you think that the wisdom is really there?
Well, we need a constitution in the UK. We don't have it.
In general, right?
We have terrible free speech laws. I mean, I'm being sued by Craig Wright in the UK in the High Court because of our terrible libel laws, right? And it's absolutely bullshit. We don't have a constitution, and I envy your constitution because at least you have that to refer back to. And when I've read the Constitution, I still think an awful lot of it stands up today. But I'm not educated enough, and I'm not American, so I couldn't debate whether it needs updating in any way. But when I have read through it, and I have studied it, and when I have read the Declaration of Independence, and I've watched these documentaries, I still felt like a lot of it still relevant today. I mean, I think the Second Amendment was designed for different kinds of weapons, and I'm in this weird position where I do a lot of work with Americans, and I have a different view on guns in the UK than the US. I would never dare to say people should not have the guns in the US anymore because I've educated myself about it. I've been to places like Wyoming, and I've learned about But at the same time, I would never want guns introduced in the same way in the UK because we don't need it. And I know that's against ultimate freedom, blah, blah, blah. I get all that. I understand what people say. But I'm just not at that point where I want that yet. But I do think a lot of your constitution still stands up today. I think I'm jealous that we don't have one.
Yeah, I mean, the Second Amendment obviously is interesting and goes to that exact thing. You're interpreting an ancient document that was written for a somewhat separate and specific purpose at that time, right? What you kind of touched on, right? You're talking about muskets and militias, but the principle of it being that you should have the right to protect yourself from the government is prescient, and definitely something that is relevant now, and people may have those fears. So I can see both sides of an argument like that. Now you talk about, you had the Defiance manifesto, and you use the word defiance, obviously, in your branding and all those things. What does defiance mean to you?
Yeah, good question. That manifesto was actually written by Alex Gladstein from the Human Rights Foundation. Obviously a close friend of mine now. Defiance to me originally was I wanted to do other interviews that weren't Bitcoin. I felt myself falling into that. I did the interview with Lynn Ulbricht, Ross Ulbricht's mom. I did with Ali Eve Knox, the adult actress, and I did a few of them like that. And I felt this desire to do other interviews, but Bitcoin has this reputation problem with certain people. It puts them off. So I just wanted another show, and Defiance felt like that. That felt like the title. Has the show truly lived up to it? Not entirely. I've done some shows which aren't entirely based on defiance, but to me, defiance means it's like a standing up against authority or rules, standing up and saying and saying you don't agree with this, and you're willing to fight against things, whether that's fighting as an individual or as a group. But but for me, it's against unfair or egregious authoritarian rule.
Right. Makes sense. And how does Bitcoin fit into that, or does it? Or is it really you just were separating yourself completely from Bitcoin to go that route?
Oh, no, definitely. I mean, Bitcoin is like monetary defiance for me. Yeah. It's like, fuck you. I mean, the great thing about Bitcoin is I've got Bitcoin and people cannot get it off me. I know now because I've gone the step beyond just having the hardware. Well, I'm now set up with a multisig. Nobody can take this Bitcoin from me now, and that is brilliant. And they can't tell me what to do. They can't steal it from me. They can't even tax me. I mean, they can threaten to, but they can't if I don't want them to. And that to me is defiance. That is, this is my money, fuck you. This isn't a certain amount that's insured in the bank, or like pounds which you can inflate. This isn't money you can steal. This is mine. You cannot get your hands on it. To me, it is an act of defiance.
Don't be a part of the 7.1 million Bitcoiners in the United States who have Bitcoin and a retirement account, but don't have Bitcoin in their retirement account. Seriously, you can hold Bitcoin in your retirement account and not just GBTC. How can you do this? Through a self-directed Choice IRA by Kingdom Trust. The first 1,000 users to open a Choice IRA will receive $62.50 in free Bitcoin. Visit retirewithchoice.com/wolf. That's retirewithchoice.com/WOLF. Podcast listeners receive extra points to move up the waitlist and get their Choice IRA first. Do it right now. It's time to take control of your financial future and free yourself from the restrictions of classic retirement accounts.
Are you sick of paying ridiculous fees to trade crypto? It's time you try Voyager. It's hands down my favorite place to buy and trade crypto, and it's 100% commission free. Voyager gives you easy access to more than 30 top crypto assets, and you can instantly transfer cash from your bank account so you never miss a trading opportunity. Even better, you can now automatically earn interest on your crypto holdings. Currently, they're offering 5% interest on Bitcoin and 6% on USDC. Yes, you heard that correctly, 6%. And there are no limits or lockups, which means your funds always stay liquid. Find out why so many people are making the switch to Voyager. Visit investvoyager.com or search for Voyager on the iTunes or Google Play Store and get $25 in free Bitcoin when you use the promo code SCOTT25. That's investvoyager.com, promo code SCOTT25 for $25 in free Bitcoin and start trading today.
Can you talk about multisig? A lot of people here may have not gone that far down the rabbit hole, but it's important.
Yeah. So I set myself up with Casa. I was just, you know what? I don't know about you. It's just been bugging me for a while. I'd gone that step to the hardware wallet. It was here in the house. I'd backed up my private key. But I was always like, if my house burns down, I'm kind of fucked.
Yeah.
Because my private key was written down in a piece of paper, and it was also stored like on an air-gapped machine in a house. The house burns down, the memory, the hardware wallet's dead, the air-gapped device is dead, and the book's burnt. That was a scenario. And also, I was just worried about me fucking up, right? Like, what if over a few years I forget about something? Or what if, one of these devices get hacked? So I spoke to Cars and I said, and they offered it to me for free, but I was like, I want to pay. I was just like, look, I think it's it's time I took that step. The really weird thing about setting up the Casa, so if people listen to know what a multisig, it just means that if you want to send any Bitcoin from your wallet, you have to sign from 3 devices. The really interesting thing about this might sound mad, is that when you set up your Casa multisig, you don't have to back up your private key.
Right.
Do you know why?
No,
it actually makes your security worse, because that private key can be found.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
But you don't need it, because what happens is you've got a 3 or 5 multisig. You only need 3 of the devices to sign a transaction. If you lose a device, you don't have to restore it. You just buy a new one and you swap it out.
Right.
So that was really interesting.
So the private keys become a point, basically become a point of failure for you, which people don't realize. And I've had, I've been down that rabbit hole because my security, I'm looking into multisig actually and never got there, but it's much like you said. It's like, I've got this shit all over the place, right? But one big bump on the head and maybe somebody doesn't understand my weird security configuration, even though, I know that like my wife will have access and all these things, but like, this isn't a safety deposit box here. This isn't a safe here. This isn't a safe here. And I'm the point of failure there. And like you said, private keys, well, they can be burnt or they can be stolen still, no matter how much you secure them.
Have you seen the film Parasite?
Yes.
Did you put it off for a while, or did you watch it straight away?
I put it off for a little while. Yeah.
Yeah. And I never put off the number one, the winning Oscars.
Yeah.
I always just watch it. And this one, just because it was like Korean, it was subtitles, I was like, I I just put it off for a while, and then I watched it, and I was like, that is brilliant. Multisig is the same, right? I just kept putting it off. I was like, oh, I can't be bothered. Do it another day. I did it, and I'm just like, it's such a relief.
How good is that movie?
Yeah, that movie blew my mind. I was not what I expected at all.
Same. And mostly because it's like every kind of movie wrapped into one. You start with this sort of playful and light comedy, and all of a sudden you're in a horror film, which then goes into like this deep dive into the human, psyche and soul. It was really one of the most brilliant movies that I think I've ever seen.
Well, the funny thing was, I watched it immediately again because I got my son home. I was like, dude, you got to watch this film. He's like, I don't want to. I said, trust me. And I watched it again. And it's one of those films, when you watch it for the second time, you spot so many different things. Can you hear this noise, by the way?
I got to do that. Just a little bit. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's one of those films where, like, you've seen the film Scream, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Did you ever watch it a second time?
I've probably seen that movie 100 times. It's from our childhood.
So that film, the second time you watch it, because you know who the killers are, it takes an entirely different spin. You're like, shit, look what they're saying.
Right, because you see every hint. They basically told you and you just didn't know yet.
You just didn't know. But they do it very, like, everyone's a hint. But it just blows your mind watching that for a second time. I watched this for a second time. There's so many different things I spotted that I didn't spot the first time. Like, for example, do you know, actually, I'm going to give things away. There'll be plot spoilers. It's just
they can fast forward. You just said there's going to be a spoiler.
I don't know. There's just some, like, just one little bit. You know the bit where they're getting clothes because their, like, place has been flooded?
Yeah.
That's cut at the scene where the other mum is in her walk-in wardrobe picking her outfit. And it's just like little moments like that. I was just like, I didn't see it the first time. And I was just like, they're just the kind of the class difference they were highlighting.
Nuance. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's so many different bits like that through the film that I was just like, oh, that's cool. I didn't spot it the first time.
Yeah. So you found Bitcoin, as you said before, because of the Silk Road and buying weed. So you've interviewed Lynn Ulbricht, Ross's mom. I did as well. And really mind-blowing conversation, to be honest, and just brutal and painful. I know there's another side to that story, but having been a user, I guess, of the Silk Road and seeing the path that led Ross down, what's your take on his situation and on the Silk Road's collapse in general?
I mean, it's very sad. Objectively speaking, the Silk Road was a solution to the war on drugs. I mean, right. Like, all the evidence is there. Prohibition doesn't work. The only person who benefits from prohibition are criminals, because they take advantage of the positive economics in that, because it's these are illicit substances. There's a big markup in the trade. What we've seen with the gradual legalization of weed and cannabis within the US is a professionalization of the industry, standards improving, the quality of the products improves. I'm not sure on the price. I think the price has been fairly stable, but at the same time, and the world hasn't collapsed. People are still smoking weed in places where it's not legal. People are smoking in places where it's legal. The difference is you've removed the criminality and you've improved the product. I believe, as controversial as it is, that should be the same for all drugs, because the war on drugs has failed. All it's done is created cartels and crime and drug addicts and all kinds of different problems.
And militarized police.
Yeah, militarized police. And it's just a big waste of money. What the Silk Road did, the Silk Road was essentially what the legalization of weed had kind of done in the US, in that it professionalized it. So I know a journalist, and he said one of the people was using the dealers on the Silk Road. They were in the middle of nowhere. They created a little warehouse. They were packaging up their product and they were selling it. They weren't driving around the streets involved in, like, gun battles or anything like that. It was semi-professionally packaged when you ordered it. But the great
Amazon
thing is
Prime.
Amazon Prime. But it was. But the one of the problems where if you take cocaine, is that so many times when you're buying cocaine, the quality is shit. You're just like, am I going to get rubbish batch here? And you go and you do a line. You're like, oh, it's a good one. Oh, that's a crap one. Oh, that's an all right one. The great thing about the Silk Road is because the dealers were reviewed, nobody dared sell shit or overcut anything because they didn't want to get a bad review. So you knew what you were buying.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And if you actually look at the research from the Drug Policy Alliance, they explain how the Silk Road reduced harm not only in the consumption of drugs, but also reduced harm in the streets. It took violence off the streets. It stopped people having to go into violent situations to purchase drugs. If you legalize all drugs, they'll professionalize and there won't be a trade for the criminals.
Right.
It will become professionalized.
Seems obvious.
And you're not going to get worse problems. It's not like society is going to collapse.
And you'll be collecting tax revenue as opposed to putting your money to work on the street to stop a problem that you can't stop, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you stop stigmatizing.
If it's going to happen anyways, and you're the government, shouldn't you want to be the one who's profiting from it? Although they are in other ways, but yeah, it's funny. I've never heard. Go ahead.
Sorry, it's just going. My point being is that Ross actually proved something with the Silk Road, and for him to now. Look, he committed a crime. He took a risk. Not that I believe he should go to jail, but I believe he understood the consequences and he's faced those. And I asked Lynn about this. I asked Lynn, what do you think? And we both agreed time served is fair enough. What use is society being served keeping him in prison? It hasn't been a deterrent for people creating dark websites. It's costing them whatever, 40, 50, 60, I don't know what the cost is, $1,000 a year to keep him in there. He could be a benefit to society. It's serving no purpose to anyone. He should be released. I don't think he will be under the current administration, and we just have to hope he gets a pardon at some point. But it's terribly sad. I'm a big fan of Ross. He wrote to me once, which was amazing, which was just blew my mind. And he wrote me this really kind and genuine letter. And is he going to come out and create another dark web website or become a criminal? Of course
no
not. He
way.
would just add to society. Yeah, exactly, dude. He would just add to society. So hopefully at some point he will get a presidential pardon. Sadly, it probably won't happen until he's like 50 or something, which would just be awful.
Yeah. And it's interesting that the people who are actually selling drugs on the site got light sentences, and he's got like 3, life terms plus 40. I mean, it's more than El Chapo and these, literally cartel leaders. It's just absurd, and I don't understand how, even if he did every single thing that he was accused of, it still doesn't seem like the sentence fits the crime, or that doesn't fit almost.
They were just trying to prove a point. Judge Forrest, is a bit of a cunt if you ask me.
Clearly.
And but the interesting thing, Silk Road 2, the guy did that. Didn't he get like 2 weeks or something?
He maybe served a few weeks or months or something, but whatever it was. And that guy knew exactly what he was doing. Yeah, there's no argument that.
I think they had child porn on the Silk Road 2. Ross didn't allow for that shit.
No, people accuse Ross and the Silk Road of, hiring hitmen and child porn, but that's all completely false. And I think that's a result of what Silk Road 2 did. And the guy who did Silk Road 2 obviously knew what he was doing by copying the first one. You can make an argument that Ross was a bit naive. Obviously, he was trying to build this libertarian paradise or whatever. And so the people who followed up and did it knowingly should have received a much harsher sentence than him.
But how amazing is Lynn?
She's so awesome, man. I feel so bad for her. It's just, what a terrible, and there's there's a lot of people suffering through similar things in this world, unfortunately, all over the place, but it's really just couldn't have, it's the last person you would want to see it happen to when you speak to her, for sure. Yeah. You touched on something really interesting there, though, about Silk Road that I'd never heard or considered, which was the reviews. Yeah, because but the whole world now is like every business is made or broken based on a Yelp review or a Google review. And that was not the case back then. So you're basically saying that they were way ahead of their time, not just in like the libertarian marketplace, but in the way that you like verified a product, or, the way that a user could really tell another user what they should or shouldn't be buying. That the whole world runs on that now.
Yeah, dude, it honestly, that was the game changer. I remember I used to buy and you'd pay more. Like you'd see like this guy would be like 86% pure Peruvian flake, £100 a gram. I'm like, I'll take that shit. And was brilliant. It just totally worked. Like, and look, I don't do drugs anymore now because I went too far with it, and I realized actually, certain drugs like cocaine, they're not good for you long term. I mean, even short term, they're not great. But and I would never want my kids to do them. But I still believe prohibition is worse.
Of course, just because you wouldn't do it doesn't mean that there's not a place for it in the world. Unfortunately, for better or worse. So you mentioned obviously the shit libel laws in the UK and your situation with Craig Wright. Can you give a bit of an update? I'm sure everybody here knows the situation, but maybe give the very quick intro and an update to where that stands.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's suing me for libel because I said he's not Satoshi and said he's a liar and a fraud. So right now we're going through something called discovery. Trial date is set for May next year. There's different steps I can't talk about a lot of it, but there's different steps in the process we have to go through in the case, and there's different times it might collapse. I can't believe it hasn't collapsed. It's the most ludicrous situation that everything that you've seen happen in terms of information provided and lies and such, which you've seen in the climate case, is happening in this one. And I look forward to winning the case or having it thrown out or whatever happens, and hopefully he goes off and does something else. It's somebody who clearly has mental health problems to be able to be such a compulsive liar.
Yeah, it reminds me of someone else, but we already touched on that person earlier, I guess. Some of our politicians. But so how can people help you with that? And I guess also to ask, has this been exceptionally expensive for you? Has it kept you up at night? I mean, this seems like a net negative for you to be sued, actively by someone who clearly has somewhat unlimited resources. Yeah,
so I've been very fortunate in that people have helped support I could not have financed this. We're into the hundreds of thousands. I'm not a wealthy person. So a couple of people privately helped me to begin with. That's not been announced their names, but Tether are now helping finance my legal costs. And I mean, it's really, really expensive. And what it does highlight is that libel laws benefit to the rich who can pay for expensive lawyers, and people who don't have money get silenced. This is why the First Amendment that you have is so fucking important, because it's a leveler, and we need that leveler. And you have to accept people therefore being mean to you and lying and whatever. But that's better than having a situation where rich people or governments can silence people through lawyers and money. But it has been stressful at times. It's been quite good fun sometimes. I'm not gonna lie. Like some of the ludicrous things that have happened. I mean, no one can really help. It's more of a case of patience now, because people want to know what's going on. But I'm just having to just say, be patient. Be patient with the case being resolved.
So I've noticed that you actively publish your earnings for the podcast, and what struck me when I've looked at it before is the level of your expenses. Because for people who do it, I guess like this, you kind of have your Zoom call, you have your producer, you post it. Are those expenses coming from your heavy travel and actually going to meet all of these people in person? Is that where the expense comes from?
So the majority is now staffing.
Right.
Like I said, I've got 2 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees, and I'm not employing cheap people. Like my engineer is really shit hot. He's expensive. So I'm spending I don't want to give anyone's salaries away, but let's give a broad area. I'm probably spending, in dollar term, $20,000 to $30,000 a month on salaries.
Wow.
Yeah. Across freelancers and full-time.
Yeah.
My travel used to be $10,000 a month, because I would be traveling to 2 to 3 weeks. I would be doing, if I came out to the US and I would do 5 cities and 15 flights, you've got the flights, hotel costs, food. And the thing is, when you're traveling that intensely, you just want to spend that extra $50 on a nicer hotel room.
Oh, of course.
You want to get to your hotel, and you just want to sit at the restaurant and have a steak and a glass of wine. And I could have done everything cheaper, but it was just a hard work. You just want those kind of comforts. But yeah, like the podcast does well, but I reinvested most of it back into it to just grow the product and the business.
Why was it so important for you, though, to be face-to-face with people and to have the interviews in that manner?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because obviously I've not been doing it for the last 4 months. It was a number of reasons, Scott. Honestly, when it first happened, my marriage breakup was awful. Like the fucking hell I went through with that. And I think I almost, like, not in a hippie way, almost manifested a life where I could get away every 2 or 3 weeks for 2 or 3 weeks. So I'd be with my kids and get away. But what actually ended up happening is that I started doing these interviews in person and then some remote. And the ones in person, you have a much better rapport. Right now, we see each other over Zoom.
Not the same.
It's not the same. That peripheral vision, you talk over each other less. There's more body language that goes into it. You get more emotion out of the interview. You draw things out in certain interviews you wouldn't normally get. Like I did one with the Mallers family, and that could not have happened if it wasn't in person. That said, post-lockdown, I don't know if I'm going to travel as much because I'm kind of over a lot of my breakup issues. My kids like having me around more, and I want to be a filmmaker. So I need to be here working on a craft. Like I work a lot on, I studied a lot about podcasting. I actually tried to teach myself how to be a better host, and now I'm trying to learn how to be a filmmaker. So I won't have the time to travel.
So what did you learn about being a better host? Because I could certainly use a few tips. I'm new to this.
How many have you done, mate?
We're about 40 something ish in recorded. So it's just a baby.
Have you done any in person?
We haven't been able to do them in person at all because I started basically right before COVID and we were bootstrapping it. And so, yeah, it's been all, and a lot of them without even video. So, we were just talking, which obviously you can tell when the person's, checking their phone or disinterested or doing other things. Yeah.
Where you are a secret?
No, I'm in Florida.
You're in Florida. Okay. So there are people in Florida, someone like Jun Seth you could interview, or Krista Rose, and you could do that in person. And you should do one in person. Charlie. Yeah, Charlie. Fuck yeah, of course, Charlie. I mean, you should do one in person to see what it's like. So it's hard. Most of it is just experience, right? Like you're a DJ, dude. When you first got behind the decks, and it was proper 1210s, I imagine. You're terrible, and then over time you just got the hang of it, and then it becomes more natural. That itself will come. The biggest step change for me in my podcasting is when I tried to make the transition from having a list of questions to having nothing.
Yeah.
So I started to go into interviews with nothing and just talk. And, and that was really difficult to begin with, but it got easier. And I also spent a lot of time listening to Rogan and tried to listen to how he moves interviews forward. And he does brilliant things where he gets people to explain things and blah, blah, blah. And then I got to the point where I didn't have questions anymore. I went into every single interview without any questions prepared. I knew who the guest was and just did it. And I did that for like 3 months, and that was an absolute game changer because it meant it became a conversation, just like two people hanging out and kind of a bit of fun. I now have questions, but the questions are only if I need them, and they don't, like tomorrow I'm interviewing Brian Armstrong from Coinbase. I can't have questions there because there's a shitload I want to go through with him, and I don't want to miss anything out.
Right.
But if I was going to interview you, Scott, I would just get on and shoot the shit with you. And that was the biggest game changer, is to not have a pen, not have a pad, not have any questions, just talk to people. And yeah, that was the biggest change I found in podcasting.
I appreciate that. So now making the transition into filmmaking, or focusing more on it. Obviously, you've been doing it for a long time. What's the next project? What are you looking to do?
So I did my first couple of mini documentaries just to learn. I don't think they're great. I cringe watching them the whole time. Other people have said nice things. I think some people are being nice. I mean, I know they're okay. I think they're not bad for my first go. I think with the right team around me, I can do better. My long-term goal is to make feature films, right? That's my long-term goal. So the intention is, once lockdown ends, is I'm trying to work on making a music video. So there's a band. I've got a concept for a music video. Hopefully I'm going to be able to make that. And then what I think I might do is just for a couple of years make music videos or short films if I can break into that. And then I've got a very, very loose outline prepared for a concept for a film, which will be a short, 30-minute film, which I'm about to start working on the script for. But most of this stuff, I expect it to be shit until I learn how to do it well, right?
That's my experience in music, dude. You're literally describing. I can't even listen to stuff I made, in the beginning, and it's amazing to hear the progress, obviously, and to be able to look back and have a record of basically your entire process. So I would imagine with music, it's very similar to filmmaking. But man, yeah, it takes a long time before you ever can look back without regret on the things that you put out publicly.
Well, it's like my first podcast. My first few, I listened to them. I just hate listening to them. But all this stuff is just hard work. That's just relentless hard work. So people will say things like, "Oh, you're just creating a podcast. You just switch on." I'm like, you've got no idea how
so much work.
Hard, people work. Yes, you can just turn up and do an interview, or you can craft. You can craft an interview, you can practice it, and then you can work on document. I have a goal, and I'm just working really hard to do it. And look, I might fail. Filmmaking might be one step too far, but I'm going to give it a go.
I seriously doubt that. So have you ever thought about doing a movie about your life story?
No, that'd be awful and shit. I'm not that interesting. I really have no interest in telling my life story. Although I do have an idea of a script for a film which is based on just part of something that happened in my life. But it's actually about somebody else. Which I think is like a really solid idea. But these can all come with time. Right now I just want to get to be. I want to be able to get to the point where I can make a short film. It's really interesting because I've looked out at some of the films that have been made on low budgets. So, do you know Darren Aronofsky?
Mm-hmm, of course.
Yeah, did Mother and Black Swan. But one of his first films, Pi, was made for $60,000. Which kind of blew my mind.
Such an epic movie too.
Dude, so epic. But it can be done, right? But there's another film. Have you ever seen Primer?
I don't think so.
It's a film it's like a time travel film. It's brilliant. I found out it was made for $7,000.
I've never seen it.
Dude, you got to see this film and know it was made for $7,000. You'd think it was made for $700,000. I can't understand how they made it for $7,000. I just don't understand it, but they did. So in my head, I'm like, right, if I want to make a film, what can I make for X budget? And like I said,
so reverse engineer it from the budget.
But I don't give a fuck, right? If I had to sell my Bitcoin to make a film, I sell my Bitcoin to make a film and just go and do it. And I don't give a fuck. But that is the goal, just to make films.
Yeah, the low budget film of my life, the one that had the biggest impact on everyone I think of our generation was Clerks. Do you remember? Did you ever see? Yeah, the original Jay and Silent Bob. If they spent more than $50 on that, I would be surprised. I have no idea how much Kevin Smith spent on that, but it always still blows my mind that you can put together. It proves that the story is what truly matters, and I think that's interesting. And you touched on obviously going back and saying, I wouldn't do my life, but there's this story that came from my life, and that would make a movie. And I think that any artist finds all of their inspiration in their own experiences from the past, because otherwise it comes across probably as contrived or being a poser or a LARPer or whatever they say in this world. But you have to really, it has to come from a place of understanding, and I would imagine with filmmaking that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's people's life stories I want to see because they're super interesting, amazing people. But I do think a lot of filmmakers come up with concepts from things that have happened in their life and affected them. That I expect happens all the time. Like, you know, I've had drug problems. I've been through a divorce. There's plenty of things that can inspire ideas from in those two ideas alone. I think that's what happens for a lot of people. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that, dude.
So you just said you would spend all your Bitcoin to make a movie. That attitude about like, it's just money, kind of fuck it. Did you always have that, or did that come from the experience of basically acquiring the wealth, losing the wealth, acquiring the wealth, losing the wealth?
Yeah, good question. I just don't care, kind of. I'm just a risk taker. Awesome. I always have been. So I just don't really care. Like I live a kind of a simple life. I live in a small town called Bedford. We haven't got a particularly big house. We have a couple of holidays a year, and I have everything I need. Like, what more do I? Look, I would love an Aston Martin or a Lamborghini, but I don't need it.
Aston.
And I'm not really one of those people who's like saving for his retirement. I expect I'll always work. So, like, I've got what I need. So, if I did say I managed to save up $100,000, and then I wanted to make a film and it cost $100,000, I wouldn't think, oh, I'm not going to do that because, you know, I need that for my retirement. I'll be like, fuck it, I'll spend it. And then what will I learn out of making that film, and can I make another film?
Right.
And I've been I've been so lucky in life, Scott. Last year I went to 18 countries, and I've been to 40 countries, I think, with this podcast, and traveled the world, met amazing people, and everything's kind of worked out okay. So yeah, I think things kind of work out okay.
I love that positivity because, there's plenty of people who would have gone through the things you've gone through and be like, I had a shit lot in life, or, you know, life is hard or it's unfair. And you're like, yeah, life's great. You know, like it's all worked out. Yeah. So that attitude is probably what carries it.
But I didn't. Like, I had two parents who stayed together and loved each other. You know, I went to a good school. I live in England, which is a good country. I've not grown up in Eritrea or fucking, I don't know, like shitty regions of China or East Siberia. Like I grew up in England, and I grew up to good parents who worked hard, who loved us all. I've not had a hard life. I went to Venezuela, dude. That place is fucked. I went to this when I was there. I went into one of the barrios, which is like the slums. And I went to a NGO, which is providing meals for 300 kids a day because they've got no money. And you see it firsthand, and it's shocking. So, like, what's the worst that's going to happen to me? My very worst case scenario is I lose everything and I have to get a job in a pub or in a cafe. And I still got a nice life. I still live in England. Yep. Like, I go to work, I watch TV, and I can go for a run. So whatever happens, if you live in a country like England or the US, you still your basic form of life is really good.
Yeah, we have a nice big pillow if we fall, for sure.
Yeah,
I love that, but I just love that approach to life. It definitely echoes the way that I view things, and it's very refreshing and great to hear. And also probably a good time to go, because I know we're up against it here. So where can everybody follow you, see what you're up to in the future?
Yeah, just if you want to listen to any of my podcasts, just search for What Bitcoin Did or Defiance. If you want to watch my films, it's youtube.com/Defiance TV. And if you want to hit me up on Twitter, it's @Peter McCormack. And thanks for having me, dude.
Oh, man, thank you so much. And we're definitely going to do this again. I feel like you're the kind of person I could talk to for like 4 hours. But next time I'm flying to you so I can get my first in-person interview out there.
Do it, dude. I'm probably going to be in Florida before you're here, though. So maybe we'll do it in Florida.
It sounds good. I'm in. Let me know.
Let's go.